Good morning. Welcome to the Boise Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. We are a spiritually diverse, justice-seeking religious community with one great aim: proclaiming the power of love at the core of our living tradition. Whoever you are, wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. Whomever you love, however you identify, you are welcome here. Whatever faiths you have known, if any, whatever doubts you carry, you are welcome here. And we are so glad that you've joined us this morning. I'm the Reverend Sara LaWall. I use she, her pronouns. It's my great honor to serve this beloved community. I'm joined today by Sharene Watsen, who is serving as our celebrant, and Carrie Bastian, our music director. Thank you all for being here on this frigidly cold winter morning. I want to take a moment and welcome particularly our online community, those that are joining us via Zoom. Let's turn around and wave at our friends online, and friends you know, you are invited to turn your cameras on if you're able so we can see your beautiful faces and welcome you among us this morning. Good morning, William and Ben. Good morning, Marianne. Good morning, Lisa. Good morning, Bob Hutley. It's so great to see you there. Good morning, Mary Nodell and David. Good morning, Edith. Good morning, Richard. I see all these names. Good morning, Justin and Gia and Allie. Thank you all for joining us and reminding us that we worship together as one beloved community beyond the walls of this sanctuary. And a special welcome to any newcomers who are joining us for the first or second time. We know it takes a lot of courage to check out a new community, and we're very honored you've chosen us this morning. We hope you'll take some time, if you're with us in person, to introduce yourselves to us during our hospitality time in our hospitality room after the service, or write in the chat if you're a newcomer online so we can warmly welcome you. We invite you to fill out our newcomer cards, which are in our entryways, and we'll post a link in the chat so that we can keep you connected with all that is happening here in our fellowship. And we are a very busy congregation, doing all kinds of extraordinary work and many small groups meeting here and work out in the community. I have a few quick announcements that I want to share for the whole community. Next Saturday, this coming Saturday, January 18th, our Refugee and Immigrant Justice Ministry team, together with the Agency for New Americans and Idaho Office of Refugees, is hosting Crossing Bridges, Stories of Transformation and Resilience from Our New American Neighbors. It's going to be a beautiful day of stories and a panel discussion and community building, and so we invite you to come here for that. And then if you're so inclined, to head downtown for the Women's March. Also, next Sunday, we are hosting, Travis and I together, an religious exploration visioning lunch. So families, young people, people interested in our religious education program, volunteers, you're invited to join us in the North Wing for lunch and some conversation to meet and greet Travis and get to know Travis a little better and talk together about what our visions are for the future of our religious exploration program. Each week, we center ourselves, ground ourselves by lighting a flaming chalice, the symbol of our free faith, a beacon of hope, love, and justice. As we light our chalice here in the sanctuary, I invite those of you in our virtual community to light a chalice or a candle if you have one nearby, and then share in the chat with one another where it is you have lit your chalice this morning. From the outside, looking in, it might confuse people, and people might wonder, what is this religious community that offers a space of worship, community, and welcome to atheists and agnostics and theists and Buddhists and pagans and Christians and Jews, all worshiping together? It might seem strange to people, but that is the story of who we are, and it has been for a very long time. But of course, with all of those different identities, we Those are big divisions to cross, and there's somehow, as Unitarian Universalists that hold true to the fact that we have no creed, we are able to bridge those divisions. So our gathering hymn this morning is a lovely chant in our teal hymnal, number 1023, Building Bridges. The words will also be on the screen. I invite us all to rise in body or spirit and sing together. We'll listen to Carrie play it all the way through once, and then we'll sing it through 3 times.
We come from and live on land considered sacred by many indigenous peoples, known as Bannock, Shoshone, Paiute, and many other tribes that lived here sustainably for thousands of years, inhabiting a vast region including much of Idaho.
We recognize the long history of the land, long before colonization, and acknowledge the ancient tribes whose names have been lost in history.
With this acknowledgement, we wish to demonstrate our commitment to dismantling the legacies of settler colonialism. We honor Indigenous peoples' connection to the land and support their right to sovereignty.
In the challenges of these truths, may we move through the world bringing justice in every way that we can, listening to the truths spoken to us by Native American peoples, making space for them to re-inhabit this place, and giving them back the resources they need to heal their communities.
Our spiritual theme for this month of January is living love through the practice of story. Well, we couldn't have a theme of story without having a service that honors the story of Unitarian Universalism and the story of this fellowship. Where we came from, how we came to be who we are today, and what story we hope to tell of who we will become in the future. 64 years ago, this coming May, 2 historic milestones took place. This fellowship declared itself an official religious organization, filing incorporation papers with the state of Idaho. And on that very same weekend, Unitarians and Universalists voted to consolidate, merging the American Unitarian Association and the Universalist Church of America into the Unitarian Universalist Association. The stories of our faith and our religious tradition and this fellowship inspire us to keep tending the flame of our chalice, to keep showing up for justice, equity, and transformation, to keep holding love at the center of all that we are and all that we do, building the beloved community together, no matter the challenges. I've not captured all of the stories of our history. There are so many, and stories worthy of our reflection, exploration, and learning. But this is, today, the story of us. So as we enter into this time of worship together, I invite us all to take a breath together. Fill your body with breath. Breathe with this beloved community. Breathe knowing that our breath connects us to each other, to our bodies, to this planet. Offering us an opportunity for stillness, to tune in to our spiritual center and listen deeply to our heart's own longing. Thou art the song of my heart in the morning. Thou art the dawn of truth in my soul. Thou art the dew of the roses adorning. Thou art the woven whole. Thine is the grace to be steadfast in danger. Thine is the peace that none can destroy. Thine is the face of the need-driven stranger. Thine are the wings of joy. Thou art the deep, to the deep in me calling. Thou art a lamp where my feet shall tread. Thy way is steep past the peril of falling. Thou art my daily bread. Thine be the praise of my spirit uplifted. Thou art the sea to each flowing stream. Thine be the days that are gathered and sifted. Thou art the deathless dream. This morning we have a centering video to share with you, followed by a centering hymn we'll sing together. And much of this reflection is from the Reverend John Cummins. When the American Unitarian Association and the Universalist Church of America finally merged on May 12, 1961, a grand total of 141,685 members of 895 congregations became one. America's leading religious journal at the time, the Christian Century, called it the most thorough sounding of the views of a religious people in modern times. Offering fellowship and support to one another after both movements suffered the ravages of the Great Depression and World War II, the two organizations had come together unofficially in 1953 to form the Council of Liberal Churches. Of course, being good Unitarians and Universalists, we had to discuss the matter for another decade, following our commitment to congregational polity and requiring a vote of representatives from each denomination and its affiliate congregations. Uniting proved only slightly more complex than merging, say, General Electric with General Motors. In poll after poll, the desperate merger commission sent out more than 140,000 pieces of literature. This makes you really appreciate email, doesn't it? As merger grew closer, a host of issues and their advocates grew more intense. Before the final ratification, no less than 23 amendments were made to the merger agreement. We love amendments. Here in this video are some reflections from a few ministers who were serving during that time of our UU merger.
I was in Richmond, Virginia, when the merger discussion was going on. I don't remember being too involved in it because I was too involved in other things, civil rights and whatnot. So merger wasn't really high on my agenda. But I do remember that I preached against it. And I chuckle now because the congregation voted for it. So that was how much influence the minister had. Learned that early in the game. I'm not certain why I was opposed to it, but in thinking about it, I think I was influenced by A. Powell Davies, for one thing.
And I stumbled into one of these meetings, and there were like 50 people packed into this, I won't say smoke-filled room, but it was a caucus room. And Powell Davies, this person whose books I had and whom I admired so, and I actually had heard him preach once, amazing man. But he was leading an effort to oppose merger. And so that was very disappointing to me and disillusioning.
Well, it was during my last years in seminary. In fact, I was already engaged to be married. My husband-to-be and I went to a conference in Andover in the summer of '53, and we heard that this was coming, and we thought it was a great idea, we as individuals.
My own feeling at the time was that there was a great deal of enthusiasm and excitement on the expansion of Unitarianism, especially in the South and really throughout the country, but it was the height of the fellowship movement and people were really excited about this. And I felt that this would divert our attention from growing.
Somehow Unitarians would be held back by that kind of emphasis and resources being put into merger at that particular time. On the Universalist side, I think there was a fear that they might be swallowed up. I always had this very positive feeling about merger. It was like a non-issue for me. And I wasn't surprised when the two plebiscites in the late 50s were, pretty overwhelmingly positive. The final one, I think, was about 90% of congregations voting, both Unitarian and Universalist, for consolidation.
You can put it either way. It's something that should have been done a long time ago, and now we're ready to do this, and we want to join with the Unitarians. Or we are poor and we are losing ground, and we jolly well better join with somebody who's a little bit more successful, or we're going to be in real trouble.
But it was also a very exciting time. There was a great deal of enthusiasm, and hopes were high for the future of the movement.
It was kind of we're almost ready to hug each other, even though we've never felt Unitarians were very huggable, but it was kind of what we've been waiting for and kind of urging onward has finally happened.
The highlight of the meetings in Boston where the two groups were consolidated was the service at Symphony Hall, where they had the pulpit from Channing and from Hosea Ballou.
We were very, very excited. Some of our former parishioners from the South had come up because it was a big event for them too.
Immediately after the merger, and Dana Greeley had been elected president.
It was understood that as one of the aspects of merger, Philip and his counterpart in the Unitarians, Dana McLean Greeley, would each step down gracefully, graciously, whatever, and a new person would be chosen to head the new organization. And when the time came, Phil stepped down, but Dana McLean Greeley kept right there.
There were those, I think, who feel in retrospect that the Universalists got the short end of it, and sheer numbers helped determine that, perhaps.
But then in the 60s, we developed a number of controversies within the movement, the Black Power movement, for instance, the Vietnam War. This tended to fracture parts of the association, and so the whole thing sort of slowed down, that we didn't realize the growth that we had hoped for, and that we became consumed with these various issues within the movement. Over the long run, that it has proved to be a very beneficial thing that resulted from the merger.
My favorite authors was John Cheever, and this to me is as good a mission statement as any for our future, and that is to, he was speaking of the mission of being a writer, but I see it as our mission as well, to build small shelters of hope and to illuminate life's darkened ways.
Oh, those are words still beautifully prophetic for today. Back in 1933, the hymn As Tranquil Streams was intentionally written by Marion Franklin Ham to celebrate this growing relationship between the two denominations who were finding it useful to work together in advance of the first hymnal that would be shared by the AUA and the UCA, Hymns of the Spirit. As the final votes were cast and a new Unitarian Universalist Association was formed, the assembled sang this hymn together, and it became known as the hymn that honors the merger. The original lyric was written as our kindred fellowships, and the first verse was this: as tranquil streams that meet and merge and flow as one to seek the sea, our kindred fellowships unite to build a church that shall be free. Let us rise in body or spirit and sing together hymn 145 in the gray hymnal, words on our screens as tranquil streams.
Our call to worship this morning is from Pat Uribe Lichty. We come from many places, along different paths, bringing different truths. We come with different histories and different realities, and yet we come together as one people, with faith that we can use our differences to heal ourselves and each other, to bring wholeness to a fractured world. We come seeking to find community, to find acceptance of who we are. In this place, we may find others who are much like us and others who are much different. May our lit chalice remind us that we are a people taught by different stories with many voices, but always one people working for a world where love creates justice and justice gives birth to peace. Come, let us worship together. With our promise of building beloved community, we celebrate our commitments to being a multi-generational community, a community of generosity, and a community of care and connection. At this time, I'd like to invite our young people forward and bring your coats with you if you have one today, because I hear you're going to be spending a little time outside. So, young people, please come forward and join us for Time for All Ages.
Come on down, friends. Grab a seat where you can see the screen, because our Time for All Ages is going to be a video this morning. One of the important stories of our Unitarian history begins in Transylvania, which you might know as the home of something in particular, but really, Transylvania was once a part of the Kingdom of Hungary and is known to be the the European birthplace of Unitarianism. This was where the practice of Unitarianism was first practiced and adopted as a major sect of Christianity throughout the kingdom after the king signed what is known as the Edict of Torda, one of the first ever proclamations of religious tolerance in Europe in the 1500s, just after the Reformation. Unitarian churches in Transylvania and Hungary have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, following a direct lineage from those early days in the 1500s. So as you can imagine, they've seen lots of challenges, those churches, wars and dictators and fighting over borders. So in the 1990s, our Unitarian Universalist Association began the Partner Church program as a way to connect congregations here in the United States with congregations in Transylvania to offer encouragement and financial support and just care and connection when needed, as a way to kind of build a bridge between us, to keep alive the history of Unitarianism and our promise to strengthen the thread of our faith and the ties that bind us together even across an ocean. Our fellowship was one of the very first congregations to sign up to be a partner church. And we've had a beautiful partnership with the congregation and the people of Mejska, Transylvania. A number of congregants have been on pilgrimages to go visit Mejska, helped them raise money for special projects. Folks have come here to visit us in the US. And so to honor that partnership, some of our beloved members who don't live here in Boise anymore, Mary and Alan Schwartzman, helped design and then helped the whole community build our little bridge that sits right out there in our outdoor sanctuary. And the style of the little bridge, all that wooden architecture, is the same style that's found in the villages of Transylvania, and the Unitarian villages in particular, as a symbol of our commitment and connection to one another. So today we wanted to share the story of our little bridge, which was written by two members of our congregation, Wanda Jennings, who's here with us this morning, and Treva Mays. So let's watch the story together.
Once upon a time, there were two groups of people who believed that everything in the world is connected. One group was the Boise Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, which was near a lovely river in Garden City, Idaho. The other was their sister church in the town of Mejska, which was far away in the beautiful countryside of Transylvania. They dreamed of a way to build a bridge of friendship between the two churches, to practice their belief in the world's interconnection. A major part of Unitarian Universalist history comes from Transylvania, where Unitarianism was first articulated and organized. What an important thing to honor.
The people of Mejska and of Boise were dreaming of one another. They wrote letters back and forth, sharing their joys and sorrows and their vision of an interconnected world. A great joy for the people of Mejska was the tulip, which is the national flower of Hungary. A tulip, it is embroidered, carved in wood, painted, and planted everywhere. Members of the churches practiced learning each other's languages, English and Hungarian, to better speak with each other. They would save up funds for special visits to one another to see the beauty of each other's town. This is when the people of Boise learned the cultural beauty of tulips. They were holding space in their hearts to let their friendship change who they were as people. How might this friendship change how they lived?
On the beautiful land at the Boise Church, there was a small but strong creek. The creek supported mallard ducks, frogs, cattails, a grove of trees, and all sorts of plant and bug life. The people had put a wooden board over the water to cross the stream to Jeremiah's adventure garden. The board wobbled when walked upon, and it dug into the banks of the creek. And not everyone was able to use this board to access the gardens and grove. There needed to be a safe way to cross that protected the creek. One day, a dream was born. It became Little Bridge. The people of the Boise church began to feed and care for the dream of Little Bridge. They gave love and energy to it. It started with a couple of people who shared this dream with their community. The more they shared, the more ideas and passion others felt. More and more people joined in to work and dream of what this bridge could be like.
It was an act of love for the people to serve as helping hands for this dream. They wanted to see Little Bridge grow. They began to carve posts with the designs from Transylvania, the tulips and geometrical shapes. One day they brought in a huge crane. The crane picked up 2 heavy steel girders in its strong grip and set the girders across the stream to give power and strength to the foundation. They drilled holes for huge bolts to help keep Little Bridge strong and started bolting together the support beams. The builders knew that many people from around the world would cross over this stream. By building a strong foundation and sturdy rails, Little Bridge could be a safe, welcoming path for everyone.
One person thought that trolls lived under Little Bridge. He had been listening to many stories from his friend about trolls coming to Boise seeking haven or safety. He jumped into the water to see if he could meet any trolls. What do you think he discovered? He found out how wet and muddy the creek is and learned a little of what it's like to be a frog in the creek. The people knew they wanted to help people stay dry and let the frogs and trolls alone. Little Bridge got railings to hold people on its walkway and keep them safe. They made a roof like the ones in Transylvania with a crown on the top. People carved tulips into those railings and roof timbers to dress Little Bridge up. They also cut 2 other designs into the railings, but they are a surprise. See if you can figure out the surprise shape next time you're on the bridge.
It took hours and hours and hours. Many people had to dedicate themselves to be helping hands. From ages 5 to 70, the people watched and helped, dreamed and worked, shared and laughed together. Now, Little Bridge stands tall and beautiful. It's a bridge of friendship between the Boise UU Fellowship and their partner church in Mesku, Transylvania. We're so proud to have loving people who worked hard to make this bridge that will last for generations. Sometimes we have a big party specifically for our connection to the people of Mesku. We share Hungarian music. We have a parade over Little Bridge. We bring flowers. We have special things to eat and drink. We take pictures of all of us around Little Bridge and send them to Transylvania. The end. Or a truly wonderful beginning.
I wonder, do you have any memories at the Little Bridge? Maybe you've run across on your way to play with your siblings and church friends. Maybe you've crossed the bridge as part of a ceremony with our whole congregation, with our minister and young adults leading the way with a big lantern.
The next time you are out on the church grounds, I invite everyone to take a moment for a special practice. As you stand on one side of the bridge, pause with a big breath. Exhale. Then think of a loving thought that you can take across Little Bridge today. A loving thought for the world where everything is connected. What do you wish for other people? How can you share something that brings you joy?
It was an act of love for the people to serve as helping hands for this dream.
It was an act of love for the people to serve as helping hands for this dream.
It was an act of love for the people to serve as helping hands for this dream.
It was an act of love for the people to serve as helping hands for this dream.
It was an act of love for the people to serve as helping hands for this dream.
It was an act of love for the people to serve as helping hands for this dream.
So friends, I hear that you are going to get to go take a visit to the bridge, maybe create a cool memory there, maybe invite yourself to do the practice that Mary suggested on the video, bringing a loving thought across the bridge. So I look forward to hearing how your time together goes today. And thank you all of the congregants who participated in telling this story, which now lives on our YouTube channel. So it feels very memorialized for our time. Let's join together in singing our community blessing before you head outside to the bridge. Carrie's giving her coat to a young person, and then she'll lead us in the community blessing. Have fun. Have fun. The story of who we are as a people, you go run after him. Yeah. You go for it. Here comes one more, friends. Yes, see, nobody wants to miss out on the little bridge. Anybody else? I know you want to go. You'll go after. The story of who we are as a people, as a fellowship, as a faith tradition, wouldn't be complete without a story of generosity. It is the generosity that brought us to where we are today, the generosity of those members of this fellowship who had a vision for what could be right here on this property, building these buildings, sustaining this community. But that generosity also has a history of reaching far beyond the walls of this congregation, and it has throughout Unitarian Universalism, reaching across an ocean into Transylvania, reaching to communities in need. And so today we're participating in that generosity with our offering. Watching the destruction of the LA wildfires has been extraordinarily heartbreaking and devastating. Many of you know that I came from Pasadena and served a church there. And there are two Unitarian Universalist churches in Pasadena, both who have a really historic legacy in our tradition, Troop Memorial Church was built in the early 1900s, originally as a Universalist church in the style of Art Deco. It's a gorgeous place. And Neighborhood Unitarian Universalist Church, where I came from, was founded in 1865, originally as a Congregationalist church and then Unitarian. And it's in a very historic location, not all that far from the fire line. Both of these churches have been reporting that many families have had to evacuate. Many have already lost their homes. If you've been following the news, you know that the Pasadena Jewish Temple burned down, that the Altadena UCC Church and St. Mark's Episcopal Church burned down. The destruction is pretty devastating. And so I want to invite us to extend our generosity to our Unitarian Universalist siblings and beloveds in the Pasadena area. Our offering today, 100% of the unpledged plate offering today will be split between the two congregations to go directly to their relief and recovery efforts for their congregants who are in need. Thank you in advance for your generosity. Our offering will now be received. As our ushers bring our offering gifts forward, I invite us all to join together in the collective blessing of this offering. And I just want to add my own personal gratitude, friends. It's been a really difficult week in my family, as we know a lot of the people who have suffered a lot of devastation in the Pasadena and Altadena areas. So thank you. We bless these gifts, so freely given. May generosity always be our companion as we walk the holy path towards ever greater compassion and beauty.
Our reading today is an excerpt from Why Unitarian and Universalists Belong Together, a 50-year recollection by Reverend Marilyn Sewell. Most significantly, each was a free faith with no creed, and both had a strong policy of congregational autonomy. They were compatible theologically, though each brought a different emphasis. The Unitarians brought the concept of one God rather than the Trinitarian God of conventional Christian churches. Too liberal for both Calvin and Luther, they had come out of the left wing of the Protestant Reformation and were adamant that each person must be free to follow the dictates of conscience. The Universalists, who believed in the doctrine of universal salvation, were widely known for their tolerance and generosity of spirit. Both groups allowed the umbrella of their religion to encompass an increasingly diverse range of beliefs, including atheists, agnostics, humanists, Jews, as well as Christians. And by the time of their consolidation, the class differences were more historical and perceptual than otherwise, especially in urban areas. The merger, then, was a practical move to strengthen two small denominations that had limited resources. Long in coming, it was the right way to go, not only for pragmatic reasons, but because each faith continues to teach and strengthen the other.
There are so many stories that make up the larger story of us. Every time I'm in our library and digging around in our archives and looking through photos or doing a deep dive in the internet, I'm amazed at what I find, and I continue to learn amazing stories about our history. Stories of passion and dedication and hope and deep love, even amidst the controversies and contentions that naturally arise in any community that has been around this long. There exists a core thread of values and commitments that have been our foundation, even as we've struggled to grow and evolve and adapt with the changing times. Long before the helping hands and acts of love brought our little bridge to life, making it a vital part of our story here in Boise, Unitarians gathered in the Treasure Valley with hopes and dreams of becoming a new church. I shared the story of those earliest days in a sermon back in April when we kicked off our capital campaign, but here's a quick recap. Our Boise story actually begins at the turn of the 20th century in 1900, when the Reverend John Mitchell arrived as a missionary on a ministry from the American Unitarian Association, one of many missionaries at the time, given the charge to plant churches in new cities on the western frontier. And you'll remember many of you, he took a small ad out in the Statesman, inviting all liberal-minded Christians to meet together with him at a local hotel. And Boise at that time was booming. Mining was a big industry, and a few Unitarians from the Midwest and East had relocated here. In 1907, Mitchell wrote a letter appealing for funds from the Boston Unitarian Women's Alliance. Here is what it said. Familiar words to some of you. He writes, "I am therefore intensely anxious to make the Boise Church the headquarters of a grand missionary enterprise. Think of it. Our church is the only church of the liberal Christian faith in this great empire state. The most very cruel notions of religion prevail throughout this state. Unitarians are regarded as infidels and enemies to the Christian religion. I am sure there is no place in this great country of ours that is worthy and needs so much help as this vast missionary field, having the city of Boise for a center. Oh, this work must not fail." Yes, it's worthy of applause. Who would have guessed how prophetic Reverend Mitchell's words were? How meaningful and how much they echo our sentiments today. Here we are in 2025, facing down the most cruel notions of religion prevailing throughout this state. And while that may feel disheartening, like little has changed, I am buoyed by the notion that we stand upon a legacy of faithful Idahoans who dedicated themselves to a vision for the future that lifted up humanity and welcomed the stranger and loved their neighbor without exception. They give me the fuel and the courage to keep going and build upon their work. I came here to Boise in part following a similar call as Reverend Mitchell, desiring to give resistance to the majority status quo, to raise a voice for liberal religion, seeing this place, this state, as a vast missionary field, as worthy and in need of the pursuits and values of our Unitarian Universalist faith. 26 years passed with some intermittent gathering of lingering Unitarian families until a group under the guidance of the Unitarian Association's new fellowship movement, which you heard about, established themselves here as a fellowship, a small lay-led society that became part of Unitarianism's westward expansion post-World War II. And a new legacy began to form, nurtured and tended in the living rooms of new Unitarians who'd found kindred spirits in this religion that made space for doubts and questions, for agnostics, atheists, humanists, and theists, and those who'd abandoned other religious traditions, questioning doctrine and dogma, but still seeking community. And they persevered. And just 6 years after organizing this fledgling lay-led Unitarian Fellowship, in May 1961, they officially incorporated, declaring themselves a religious organization, filing their paperwork with the state. And as I mentioned, the very same time as this fellowship's incorporation, the Unitarians and the Universalists had their final vote of ratification, merging the two groups together, which took place in Boston, a moment decades in the making. Just as this fellowship was coming into its own, Unitarian Universalism as a consolidated tradition was born. This merger, as you've heard, brought together the more rational, stoic, intellectual Unitarians with the more religious, pious, and emotive, or as Judas said, huggable Universalists. While the merger was supported by a majority, many Universalists felt swallowed up by the Unitarians, and still today, some of those vestiges remain. We abbreviate ourselves to Unitarian. That one got to go first. But as one seventh-generation Universalist matriarch retorts, Unitarian is the adjective that describes what kind of Universalists we are. The Reverend Daniel Harrington of New York Community Church preached the sermon during the final worship of that annual meeting. He spoke of the moment as a cross between a new birth, a marriage, a commencement, and a kind of death of sorts, as members detached from singular identities and institutions, combining their histories and legacies into new forms and new structures. And it was a union of grand hope and vision, as well as necessity. Both denominations were small by comparison to mainline Protestant denominations, and both were struggling financially. They needed one another. As I shared before we watched our reflections video, the two denominations had been collaborating and flirting with consolidations since the 1930s, sharing hymnals and other resources. But it really was the high school youth programs who had officially voted on their own merger 10 years earlier in 1951, forming LRY, the Liberal Religious Youth. They are the ones who should really be credited with leading their respective denominations into the future. In fact, many of them grew up and became some of our most well-known and respected UU clergy. In that merger sermon, Reverend Harrington shared this enthusiastic description. It is our tremendous potential, born of the world's response to our new relevance, caused in turn by this world's need for a religion which is dynamic instead of static, unitive instead of divisive, universalistic instead of particularistic, history-making rather than history-bound. I say it is our tremendous potential and the feeling of its surge and excitement in us and in our churches that made this Unitarian Universalist merger necessary and indeed inevitable. Looking forward from this place, what do I see? He says. I see the need for us to brace ourselves, to absorb the shock of the incredible growth which will accompany our newly won relevance. It may have been inevitable to Reverend Harrington, but the incredible growth and newly won relevance may have been overly optimistic. It didn't quite happen that way, but we all need a good hype man. And Harrington's rousing predictions no doubt stirred the hearts and minds of all those who would be part of this new era and needed this surge of excitement. So here we are, 64 years later, telling the stories of our past and integrating them into the evolving stories we want to tell about who we are today and who we will become. One common thread that reaches back is a local and national commitment to justice, to bringing our liberal religious voices fueled by science and reason, by a resolve to defend human dignity and worth, by a depth of deep neighbor love for all people that resists those very most cruel notions of religion and government that prevail throughout this state. While we can look back at all that has changed in 64 years and in 124 years, we can also see an unbroken line of hope and love and justice. A few years after our UU merger, in the midst of the growing civil rights and Black Power movements, in the years following some of the most significant upheaval and uprisings around race at the time, that included the Harlem riots, the assassination of Malcolm X, the murder of Jimmy Lee Jackson, Bloody Sunday, the Watts riots, the Newark riots, all within a span of 4.5 years. And in the years following, a great controversy erupted in our new association that would respond to the call for Black empowerment, for caucus spaces, funding both within and beyond our walls. The controversy was such that it spurred a massive walkout during the 1968 General Assembly. More than 400 delegates walked out in solidarity with their African American counterparts. And the controversy really had to do with the fact that folks did not want to fund an all-Black caucus and all-Black projects and all-Black-led initiatives. They wanted a sort of integration of sorts. Similar to the same question and the same conversation was happening throughout the country at the time. And here we are again in the 21st century, contending with continued legacies of harm and deep systemic racism, cultural white supremacy, even in our own association, and embedded in our Unitarian Universalist history and identity. Some say our current Unitarian controversy is tearing us apart. Others say it undermines our democratic principles. Others accuse us of throwing out our history, of making racial justice our creed. But what if we saw this next iteration of our history and the continued learning from our past as just part of our evolution, as a people who believe strongly in evolution? Whenever big, seemingly tumultuous changes come and challenge the stories we've told ourselves about who we are, resistance is a byproduct. And we see it today. We see it in our own legislature. And we've experienced it in our UU landscape. When the Unitarians and Universalists defended abolition and harbored so-called fugitive slaves, many among us cried, "Wait, go slow." Some of our own venerated UU heroes still professed differences between the races. Some enslaved people themselves. And the scholarship and service of Black Unitarians and Black Universalists was largely absent from our history. When women fought for the right to be ordained ministers, and the Universalist Church ordained the first woman, and later, as more women entered our UU circles, some cried, "Wait, this will change our very nature." Some ignored them and shunned them and wondered who would care for the children. When pagans and Wiccans and earth-centered spirituality wove its way into our spaces, touting religious freedom, some said, "Wait, but we are historically Christian." Some brushed them off as frivolous, some left our communities behind. And when our queer siblings found a home, testing the waters of inclusion, Some said, wait, we don't understand. And some pretended not to see. When the rationalism, humanism, and resistance to Christianity began to crack open, making space for spirituality, for reverence, for prayer, for the Bible, and reclaiming religious language, some said, wait, this is not who we are. Some resisted. Some pushed out ministers. Some refused to try. And yet all along the way, brave souls forged ahead, willing to be changed, willing to listen, willing to experiment, willing to practice, willing to lead. Even here at Boise UU, brave souls forged the way to craft a congregational resolution opposing the Vietnam War and the proposition denying equal rights to LGBTQ folks. Brave souls were arrested in the streets downtown during Add the Words, in the Capitol, and on the US-Mexico border. Brave souls welcomed an asylum seeker, and we pledged ourselves to dismantling racism and building multicultural, beloved community. Brave souls here have joined UU Bible study and Buddhist meditation and our pagan nature spirituality group and men's groups and women's groups. Brave souls have prayed with their bodies and have been willing to say amen. Brave souls have held fast to the core of who we are, a core that goes back to the earliest days of Unitarianism in Transylvania and Universalism in England, the core of religious freedom and pluralism without creed, without dogma, the core of love and salvation for all, of a relentless pursuit for liberty and justice for all, inspired by our religious legacy. A. Powell Davies, the minister referenced in the video, was a revered minister of All Souls UU in Washington, D.C. He said these words, "We are the consummation of thousands of years of religious history. We are thousands of years that have stripped off superstition and have battled tyranny, that have marched, sometimes joyfully, sometimes in agony, toward spiritual emancipation. Yet in this world of blood and sorrow, it is hardly worth mentioning, unless, in addition, we are the beginning of something, unless our religion is new. Like our ancestors before us, the Unitarians, the Universalists, and the Unitarian Universalists, we continue to be on the vanguard and the forefront of every progressive social issue of our time. And we have not always gotten it right. We have stumbled over our own hubris. But we have always believed the world can be better, and we can be part of making it better. And we commit to this faith tradition because we want to be with other people who believe that too. We want to share in that vision and connect our lives to that ideal and community together. And we're still working out our UU identity, asking more questions than providing answers, welcoming the radical spirit of seekers of all kinds, embodying our commitment to a living tradition that can evolve and change and adapt with the changing times. Oh, this work must not fail. We have a legacy worthy of our continued care and attention. How shall we nurture it and tend to it? What lessons can we learn from our past? And what legacies do we want to create for the future generations of Unitarian Universalists? How shall we continue to build it so our UU faith can continue to be a voice for liberal religion for another 100 years or more? What story do we hope Unitarian Universalists will tell about us 60 or 100 years from now? May we continue to tell a story of love everlasting, of a universal love for all people, of a people dedicated to the pursuit of truth and meaning and giving life the shape of justice, always and forever. Amen. In 2018, our choir took a pilgrimage to Transylvania to celebrate 25 years of that partnership with the people of Meška. We did a little choir tour as well, singing a concert in each village that we visited. One of the songs we sang at the concert was Szeke Áldás, a traditional Hungarian house blessing. This blessing hangs in the homes of Unitarian friends on the other side of the globe. It's found etched in wood, written on pottery, or stitched in cloth. Historically, the Szeke people were the frontier guardians of the Hungarian Empire. It makes sense that those on the border defending the realm would post such a blessing in their homes as a talisman of peace. In Hungarian, it reads, Hol hit ot szeretet, hol szeretet ot béke, hol béke ot áldás, hol áldás ot Isten, hol Isten ot szükség nincsen. Or in English, where there is faith, there is love. Where there is love, there is peace. Where there is peace, there is blessing. Where there is blessing, there is God. Where there is God, there is no need. When Mary and Alan Schwartzman, the visionaries and builders of our beloved little bridge, joined Booth in 1967, when they moved from Boise to Pennsylvania, the choir sang Szeke Áldás as a farewell blessing. And so we offer it now as a way of connecting to our Unitarian roots of this congregation and some of its longest serving members, helping us continue to tell the story of everlasting love. Each week, we take time to acknowledge the many joys and sorrows among us and to grieve our losses and share our milestones, that we might lift the burden for each other and receive the blessing of community. It is through our sharing with one another that we forge deep bonds of community and connection. We do not have any submitted joys and sorrows to share with you all today. I'll invite those on Zoom to please share in the chat. But I will invite you, if you are holding someone in your heart this morning, to speak their name aloud into this community of love, that we might hold them with you. May the arms of this community hold all our joys and sorrows, those named aloud and those that remain silent and close to our hearts. May we feel the grace in the room and be transformed by the spirit of life and love, with a warmth to celebrate the joys and a gentleness to soothe our aching hearts. I invite you to join me in a spirit of prayer and meditation. Spirit of life and love, we hold in our hearts the joys and sorrows of this beloved community. We hold in our hearts our beloveds faced with the devastation of the LA wildfires. As we breathe together, we hear the whispers of our past. We breathe the breath of our ancestors, those courageous few who tended the flames of our faith through clear skies and through the storms, those who opened their hearts and souls with courage, conviction, and love, who saw a vision and kept moving forward. May we feel them surrounding us, this great cloud of witnesses, in this home that love made, in the trees and the flowers and the secret pathways, in the quiet spaces of our hearts. May we feel them when we cross our little bridge, carrying our wishes for the world, connecting us to our past and to our people across an ocean. May we feel them all around us, holding up the vision when we are too tired. As we knit together the threads of our history and heritage, our present and our hopes for the future, moving forward through the ages, may we carry them with us always. They, too, saw a broken and hurting world. They, too, marched for justice. They, too, prayed for peace. They, too, demanded equality. We carry the flame now, forever burning with their embers. Their legacy is ours to continue, to mold and shape for a new generation as we carry them with us always. May we be vessels of comfort and compassion. May we be vessels of peace and justice. May we be vessels of hope and healing. May love prevail. In the name of all that is holy, we pray. Amen. I invite us all to rise and body your spirit, sing together our closing hymn, number 318 in the great hymnal, words on our screens, We Would Be One. invite you to place your hands over your heart for our closing blessing. Let us take the story of us with us as we go out into the world, pledging ourselves to lives of greater service, continuing our legacy, our commitment to each other and to this faith, to justice, to peace, to generosity, to humanity, to love, love everlasting. Blessed are we all. Go in peace.